What does it take for a family man to be willing to change? Must we always hit rock bottom before we wake up to the need for us to be better? We convince ourselves that we're doing right by our family just because we're putting food on the table and a roof over their heads. And we demand that our kids do better than us and not cave into vices while we indulge in our own. Many men end up waking up too late after the wife decides to pack up and leave with the kids. And that's where the family breaks apart and remains broken. We don't all get a second chance to change for the better and save our families, but the men that do have a unique opportunity to level up in ways that you can't imagine and earn back the love, respect, and connection they seek from their wife and kids. What's going on, fellas? I want to welcome you to Alpha Dad Consulting. I am your host, G. Vidal, and on this show, we focus on helping family men rise above the challenges they face as husbands, fathers, and providers to embracing their role as a leader so that they can create the life at home they truly desire. We do this by bringing you tactics, strategies, resources, and conversations with incredible men who are playing this game of being a family leader at a high level. In today's episode, I had the honor of interviewing Richard Macias. Richard is a men's fitness coach who helps men level up their mindset, nutrition, and fitness. He runs a business called Warpath Fitness, where he helps his clients undergo incredible transformations as he himself went through in his own life. Going from being consumed by bad habits and vices from an early age that almost caused him to lose his family twice, he found the change he was looking for through discipline in his fitness and nutrition. He became a family leader worthy of being followed and earned back the love, respect, and connection he was seeking from his wife and kids. Please enjoy our conversation as we dive into Richard's incredible comeback story. You're not going to want to miss this. Let's go.
I can see the enemy approaching the battleground. Hear the drums pound like a thunder sound loud. I gather up my crowd to prepare them for what's coming. We've been summoned.
I really want to dive into your story because you have a phenomenal story it's like one of the best comeback stories out there, man. Like the way that the things that you've gone through and all that. And I'd really love to start with just how things were with you in the household, right? Growing up as a Macias. I kind of want to focus on also not only your experience as a child in your household and all that and what that was like and the environment you grew up in, but also your relationship with your dad, man. Because for better or for worse, right? It has an impact on the way we show up as family men when we jump into marriage, when we jump into becoming dads. So I'd be curious to see how that played a role in your trajectory, in your path, the path that you chose. So if it's cool, if we could start there.
Yeah, definitely, man. So I grew up in a pretty, nice house. I mean, I had both parents, right? So that's how it started off. Mom and dad. I played sports. They put me into baseball early. I remember playing baseball at like 4 or 5 years old. That was my first sport. And then I started getting into like flag football, wrestling. Funny story with wrestling is, I started off like at 4 or 5 years old. All the guys in my team or the practice I was in, they were probably at least like 5 or 6 years older than me. So first practice I go in, I get my butt whooped. And that just, it messed it up for me. I started, trying to hide behind my dad, and my dad was trying to get me, just go out there, try your best. But I was just, a lot smaller. So wrestling, I didn't do and take serious until later on. But yeah, man, I mean, I was just the regular kid, grew up in Fontana, Rialto, the IE. Of course, like every family, right, you have your little issues going on. My parents were very young when they had me. So, they're 18 years old. They were kids themselves, right? So with that, I seen a lot of stuff. They were growing up as well. Well, I was growing up. So it did put a little bit of, I saw things that I probably shouldn't have or, experience the party life, drinking. But I come from a Mexican background, right? And I hate to say this because I hate to put a label on, but that's just what Mexicans do, especially where I was growing up, is that we get together, we have fun, we throw parties. There's more beer and alcohol at these kids' events than there is, juice, right? So I remember starting to kind of, watch my uncles, my dad, and just everybody drinking, having a good time. Hey, that's what I thought I should be doing, right? So I remember taking my first sip of alcohol at about 5 years old. My dad would be like, hey, go grab me another beer, like every dad does. And what I do is I would drink the rest of his leftover beer.
Gotcha.
So you could just, picture, after a whole night of my dad drinking, I was drinking the ends of it. Me being 5 years old, I got drunk. I remember feeling a little different. and I liked it. That's what first triggered my initial addiction. And I didn't notice it until later on in life that I was always chasing that feeling somewhat. And I just took it a little too far at one point, growing up. But it was just on the weekends, right? Whenever I'd see my parents and stuff like that, partying and whatnot. There was some arguments and stuff like that going on in the household. Now that me being a dad, me being a father, I can now see that they were trying their best, right? Like they were growing up as well. They were new to being parents. I was the first one born. So they were figuring stuff out, and during the time I was kind of like, even growing up, teenager years, I'm like, man, like, I just wish I was, brought up a little differently. Or, I moved to Temecula when I was little, and I used to see a lot of like other families, right, that were well put together. They hang out and they do stuff together. It's like, man, like I wish I had that sometimes with my household, instead of coming home to fights and stuff like that was happening, right? So I experienced a lot of that stuff, but nonetheless, my parents, they tried their best. You know what I mean? And I give it to
Yeah.
them. I respect them a lot. I still have great relationships with them. I talk to my father, I talk to my mother on a daily basis, so that's all worked out. But yeah, that's a little bit of history as me as far as, growing up, just played a lot of sports. That was probably my main focus was sports. Wasn't that great at school. So I didn't really
Yeah.
do anything, after as far as high school, going to college, and all that stuff. But yeah, man, it was a fun childhood. I can't say I had a bad childhood. I just experienced a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have,
Like at
during
an
those
early
younger
age.
times at
Yeah.
an early age that
Yeah.
kind of, once I grew up, I gravitated toward that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Just because I saw that, you know what I mean? And I felt
Yeah.
like, okay, that's what men do.
Hmm.
Men drink, we go hang out with other guys, and we get in trouble. We do what boys are meant to be boys, right? Like,
Yeah.
that saying. But that's not always the good thing. It's not always the best thing for us, right? And that's
Yeah.
where I had to really learn about discipline. So, yeah, that
You
was a
know,
little bit of my childhood.
there's one thing that I really like that you said there, man, when you were telling the story about your parents is not only they were young, right, but you said that they were growing up too, right? Like
Hmm.
they're in the learning process too.
Right.
It's like they've never been 18-year-old parents with with a kid. They've
Hmm.
never done that before, so it's their first experience every single year as you're growing, right? So
Right.
they're learning, they're in that learning process, and I think a lot of us, and this has happened to me, man, I've been guilty of that. Like as I grown up, I look back at maybe things that my parents failed at or didn't do such a good job at, or things that my dad didn't do, and part of me goes to the blame game, right? Like, oh man, they
Hmm.
should have done this, they should have done that, and then what you just said hits the nail on the head. Is like, bro, like we got to have a little bit of grace and understand that they didn't know. Like they didn't know. They didn't
Right.
know that there was a different path. They didn't know that there was something better. They just did what they could with the limited knowledge that they had, the experiences that they had growing up, right?
Hmm.
So I wanted to touch on that, man. That's kind of a cool point that you pointed out there. That despite that they're how young they were when they had you, you don't hold that against them. Like you don't look at that as a negative thing. Like you're like, hey
Hmm.
man, that was a limited thing. Like you did your best, you did what you had to do, and here we are, right? So
Yeah,
that's cool,
yeah,
man.
and I definitely had to take into consideration, like how my dad was raised. My
Mhm.
dad's father was a crappy father. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So he didn't really have somebody to look up to. He
Mhm.
didn't know how to become a dad because his dad wasn't a dad. You know what I mean? If anything, his dad was trying to be his friend more
Oh,
so,
okay.
right? So
Yeah.
like my dad would invite friends over, and my grandfather would be the one trying to befriend them. He'd be trying to party with them, right?
Oh,
And my
okay.
dad has told me stories. He's like, man, I see it kind of mad because those are my friends, and I have my dad over here trying to, party with them and hang out with him. Like my grandfather, I don't talk to him. Like
Mhm.
he's a nobody to me.
Mhm.
My mom's side of the family, she came from a broken home as well. Didn't wasn't raised with a dad at all. There was no father figure in the household.
Yeah.
So you got to take all that stuff into consideration, right? It's like they're doing their best with the tools and the cards that they also got dealt with,
Yeah.
and they're trying to make it happen because I remember seeing my dad. I mean, my dad is a hard worker. He has changed a lot. He has leveled up a lot. And I got to give him that credit. Same thing with
That's
my
awesome.
mom. Like they have done a lot considering where they came from as well.
Where do you think with regards to what you mentioned about your grandpa, like, because that's a question that comes up a lot on my side is like, when do we cut people off, right? Like whether it's family, friends, whatever it is, where we're like, hey man, like this person no longer serves me or my family, despite the blood bond that's there.
Hmm.
How do we come to that decision and say, like, as family leaders, right? Say like, hey man, like this person is not a good person to have, even though they are blood, even though they're related. Because my parents have that old school Hispanic kind of mentality, like, hey, we're family, we're family. Like it doesn't matter. Like if your uncle is this drunk dude that is always around and is messing around with women all the time, whatever the stigma is, right?
Hmm.
And they don't have the heart to say like, hey man, you can't come to Thanksgiving dinner. You know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah.
you ain't the type that we want around us. So how do we get to drawing that line, man, and that conclusion and say like, yo, no, like this person can't come in here anymore. You know?
Yeah, it's just about standing up for what's right, right?
Yeah.
Morals and values, right? So you have to figure out, what are your morals and values? What are you willing to put up with? And if there's anything that's going to cross that line, you have to stick to that, because that's your authentic true self, right? And if you don't, you're kind of going back on yourself now. Now you're starting to affect your word, and you can't take that, right? So my grandfather, he's a piece of, you know what? You know what I mean? Like a lot of females and all this stuff, touchy feely with them. Well, he tried to do that with my kids, right? That doesn't fly with me.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're blood or not. You're not going to do that. So that's where I drew the line,
Yeah.
was the fact that, okay, that's it. I don't stand for that. I don't respect people like that. And to me, you're dead to me, basically.
Yeah.
So a lot of the family doesn't speak to him at all. He's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. He's like
Yeah, but you
ostracized
got to,
himself. Yeah.
yeah, you got,
Yeah.
and people do it to themselves, right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes we don't have to do that.
Yeah.
If we stand for our morals and values, a lot of times they'll leave us, and that was the biggest thing that I saw when I started leveling up in my life. Friends, family, they started seeing the change in me. I didn't have to tell them, hey, I'm not hanging out with you no more. They already felt uncomfortable around me because
Mhm.
I was moving up. They were staying the same. And there was just that gap, that energy gap, right? The frequency just wasn't there. And ultimately, they felt insecure around me.
Mhm.
They knew, like, man, Richard's leveling up. I'm staying the same. I'm either going to have to level up or he's going to leave me behind. So at that
Yeah.
point, you either inspire people to change, or they're going to feel insecure around you. And at that point, they do leave your side. That's the best part, because now you don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. They just kind of depart organically,
Hmm.
right? Naturally. Just
Hmm.
yeah.
Naturally, natural selection.
Yeah. Crazy, man.
Hmm.
I love that. Like holding standards, right? You keep your morals, your values, you hold standards. And if people meet those standards, then all right, cool. You're welcome to the fold, man. But if
Right.
you ain't meeting those standards, man, you can't play this game right here with us. Yeah. I
Exactly.
love
And
it.
that's what it
Yeah.
comes down to, man. Just being like, when people know me, they know what I stand for, and
Yeah.
that's important for me, because I don't want anybody to really, kind of wonder and second guess. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I want people to know exactly who I am, what I'm about. And if you're cool with that, cool. You're cool with me.
So okay, so you grow up in this household, right? You get into essentially kind of like a vice, right? That gets introduced very early on to you.
Hmm.
You're coming up. You're involved in sports and all that. You let's say you turn 18, right? Now you're an adult. Where do things kind of go from there for you as you become an adult?
Yeah. So I was like that functioning alcoholic, and I don't
Mm.
even, I, I try not to label myself, because now that I've found what the reason was, I'm no longer that person, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
people label themselves an alcoholic, and it does one thing: it makes them a victim. It's like, I'm an alcoholic, therefore I have a disease. There's nothing I can do about it. That's false.
Yeah.
So I had a discipline problem. I lacked discipline. I had a substance that I liked, and I just didn't have the discipline to say, hey, you know what? That's not for me. I know it's not good for me. I can't be around that, right? So, but being a teenager, right, you can't really comprehend that stuff yet. At least I couldn't.
Mm.
So I remember drinking. I mean, I was drinking. So yeah, 5 years old, I took my first drink. I felt the effects of alcohol. I liked it. It intrigued me, right? But I didn't like keep drinking every weekend. I wasn't just like an alcoholic from that point on. Once I turned like 13, 14, parents started leaving me alone. I started seeing alcohol in the cabinet. right? Getting more introduced. Oh, I remember this stuff. Let me try the hard alcohol now. Let me try taking a few of my dad's beers now, right?
Mhm.
And then that just turned into like, oh, I'm just a kid. I'm just doing what kids do. So I remember like 16 really getting heavy into drinking, like really finding myself, getting a fake ID, having people buy it for me, and having it be something that I did on the regular, and I still played sports. The friends that I hung around with, they did the same thing, and you watch movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont, right? Like those old school movies and stuff like that. That's what
Yeah.
they're doing too, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
we're just being kids, but it turned into that vice that really took over my life. So at let's say, I would say from 16, that's when my parents got divorced, and that's when I really started using it to cope with my feelings. I really started to mask the pain of everything that led up to that point, not having my dad in the house, seeing my mom kind of struggle with stuff, me having to be the man of the house at that time at 16 years old, right? Having my little brother, my little sister, not knowing how to be a man. It just, all this stuff was compiling. And the easiest way I could turn it off was to drink. The easiest way I could turn it off was to go grab a beer because it was so accessible, right? And so that's what I did. And so it just started. I saw myself year after year getting worse, not caring about sports anymore. I stopped playing baseball. I stopped playing football. So like every year I was quitting something positive and replacing it with the drinking, replacing it with smoking weed, replacing it with doing drugs and pills. And I was just trying to escape. I was trying to escape my life at that age. But I didn't know that at the time. It was just a normal thing that I was doing. So fast forward, 18, 19 years old, I was getting into trouble. I remember getting arrested for the first time, going to jail, having, my mom crying and seeing that side. And like, I was turning into this person that was hurting my family, but it didn't matter to me. Honestly, I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I didn't care about anything, you know? And so, I had my daughter when I was 20 years old. And that's when I really had to kind of think to myself, what's going to be the next step for me? Am I going to continue going down this route, or am I going to just, try to change my ways? And I would try to change, I would go right back. Try to change, I would go right back. And so I never really got anywhere with alcohol. It didn't help me in any way. It made me worse. I didn't like the person I was under the influence. And that was another thing. That was a whole nother topic right there of like, this person that I was being during the time of being under the influence wasn't me. And I think that's why they call it spirits. When you
Yeah.
have alcohol, it's spirits, right? They call it. And so I believe that it's literally a spirit that comes in you, overtakes you because you're under the influence of a different person,
Yeah.
right? And so it's kind of like a form of evil. That's how I feel of it now. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, man, how the identity shifts, right? I like what you said about how the alcoholic, how AA meetings and all that, like, oh, my name is G and I'm an alcoholic. Like you
hmm
stating that about yourself, you're labeling yourself and you're giving yourself that, like, hey, you're always gonna be this identity, right?
right.
And and there's no escape. It's just you got to accept it. And it's like, nah, man, like you can decide right now to not be that guy, right?
hmm
And to not have that identity, to not identify yourself as that. And then you were always looking at yourself in the mirror and you were saying like, yeah, I don't like this guy that I'm becoming when I'm under the influence. I don't like this guy. But you also said that you were trying to change, like you were implementing changes and then you would go right back. You would implement changes, you would go right back. So when that happened, what is it that you were doing and trying, and why did it fail? Right? Like what was the things? Do you think it was the environment that you were in, because there wasn't a different environment or anything going on around you that was different, and that made it hard to make the change definitive? Or were there other factors at play there?
No, I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, yes, the environment, right? Because I
Mm,
was hanging around the same crowd that
mm,
didn't want to change, right?
yeah.
So I want to say the environment, but then also now being me and where I'm at now, I have to
Mm,
take responsibility for myself. I think I just truly didn't want to face the changes that I had to make. They were hard,
mm,
right? It's easy to drink a bottle and forget about your problems.
mm,
What's hard is sitting there sober minded, trying to get through it, figuring stuff out. Why am I the way? Why do I tick this way, basically, right? Why do I operate this way? Why do I think this way? How do I change that? Now, that's the hard part. That's where a lot of people fail, and that's why they never change. That's why they don't want to change. It's too hard, right? Well, guess what? That's what it's going to take in order for you to change. So I'd want to say the environment, because yes, I was hanging around the same crowd that wasn't changing, but that was my fault, because I should have been able to say, you know what? Obviously, these people around me are not a good influence on me. When I'm around them, I want to drink, but now I got to take responsibility and realize that I can remove myself. I'm not stuck. Nobody's holding a gun to my head telling me to drink this beer, and I get that a lot. A lot of guys that I help, it's like, man, I can't stop drinking. I said, why can't you stop? Is somebody placing a gun to your head and telling you, you better take a sip? And if you don't, I'm pulling the trigger? Well, no. Okay, then. So you're the one physically putting the bottle to your mouth and then drinking it. Yes. Okay, you're the one that can stop this then. You know what I mean? I don't care if you got to duct tape your hands on the side of you. Just don't pick up a bottle and you're fine. But it's harder said than done, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So tell me, becoming a dad, right, at 20, you're young, man, you become a dad, and what's going through your mind, man? You hold your baby girl for the first, baby girl, right? Your girls,
My daughter.
your daughter's your oldest. You have 3 daughters?
I got 3 daughters, 1
and then
boy.
You got a young hero. You got a young man.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's awesome, man. So you're holding your baby girl for the first time. You just became a dad. You know that there's these things going on, these spirits that you were talking about, like that you got to put down, right? A lot of men think that, once you become a dad or once you get married, that you'll break away from the vice. It's just naturally, organically, right? Like I deal with some men, and even myself, man, like with pornography growing up, that was a big thing, right? And thinking that going into the marriage, like, oh, once I get married, this is not going to be a problem anymore, right? Once I become a dad, this is not going to be a problem anymore. And it still is. Right. So what's going through your mind as you become a dad, man, holding your baby girl for the first time, and the changes that you want to make, right? And that kind of thing. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
I was scared.
Yeah.
I was scared. You know what I mean? And it was probably like one of those moments where I looked into my daughter's eyes, and it's like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I got to do it for you. And it took me a long time. Like, even having her, I knew I needed to change, but I still wasn't doing it. And then it just had even more guilt. Like, man, I can't even change for my daughter. Like you say, you think everything's going to change once you have the baby, once you get married. No, like, and I thought that too. I thought, like, man, this is going to be such a great thing for me. It's going to help me want to be better. And it did, but I still had to do the work. And it's not a magical thing that happens that once you have a baby and you get married, it just automatically all your problems go away. No, in fact, there's more issues now that you have to deal with. And so that's what I was really scared about. I was like, man, I can't even control myself. I can't even take care of myself. And I have this little girl that is going to depend on me for most of her life, and I got to be the one to set that example, to set that standard. And right now I can't. So I remember running back to the same thing that made me feel comfortable when she was being born. I was in the car getting drunk when my wife was delivering her. I was drinking beer in the parking lot of the hospital, trying to ease my pain when my wife was going through the most crucial pain to give me my daughter. And that was so selfish of me, And now that I realize that, I'm like, I was selfish. I was very selfish. I was only thinking about Richard. How can I make myself feel good? And that's what kind of like gave me that light bulb effect, right? It's like, okay, I'm onto something. I need to start thinking about other people. Like, who cares about my problems, right? Like, who cares about my childhood? Who cares about what my father, what my mom did? Now I got to be a father to this little girl. So all that stuff has to go away. I can't play a victim anymore, right? And that's when I started to like, okay, I'm on to something. Like, I got to change. And this was like years process, right? I'd always go back and forth, back and forth. But deep down, I knew I was being selfish, And so that's what a lot of our problems are, especially men, right? We're selfish. And if we can start thinking about other people it just makes stuff a little bit more better for us, and we're able to make better decisions by not thinking about us so much,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was scared, man. I was frightened.
Yeah. No, man,
Just
it
to be
is.
honest.
It's a scary thing. And it's funny, man. Like I ask guys that question and it's either one of two things. It's either they're really scared, right? Like, man, I was terrified because I gotta level up, right? Or
Hmm.
I'm like super excited and stoked, right? Like I'm ready to go type of thing. It's like one of the two things. And based on those responses, like you either you take action in a certain direction after that moment,
Yeah.
right? Um, I was remembering a post, man, that you had on IG that I saw where you told a story of that your wife and I believe it was just your oldest daughter that you had at the time. You correct me if I'm wrong, but she was convincing you to go to Texas to go for a trip or something,
Hmm.
and you were hesitant about wanting to go, right? Because something was happening there where you were at, but you decided to go anyways, right? And then
Hmm.
there was if I remember correctly, there was like a raid or something that happened while you were
Yeah.
in Texas with your family, and you were
Hmm.
able to avoid that right. Can you speak
Yeah.
to that as well? And did that at all play an impetus in you? Like, holy crap, man! Like I gotta change. Like, look what could have happened to me had I not, right, been there, or had I been there instead of with my family, type of thing. So,
Yeah, yeah. So I got into the growing game. I started
mm-hmm,
growing weed, and
mm-hmm,
the crew, the people that I was with, and our team, you should say, we were supplying a lot of weed, a lot of marijuana. Mexico all the way around, and we had mansions located all around Southern California, different areas. And we would basically be there, live on site while we're growing the weed. We would take different shifts, and just help grow everything out. Well, I had my daughter and my wife living with me in those mansions while I was working and growing the pot and stuff like that. And so everything was fine. My wife, she's originally from Texas, and during the time that we were there, obviously I wasn't living right. I was, like I said, I was very selfish. I was doing drugs. I was drinking a lot, partying. I would go out on weekends and not come home, and she got tired of it. She was like, I'm done with this stuff. Like, I'm leaving. I'm heading back to Texas. I'm taking our daughter because obviously you cannot take care of her. You can't take care of yourself. So I'm leaving. And if you want to stay with us and if you want to be part of us, then you'll come with us.
mm-hmm,
And I said, nah, like me being in that mindset that I was making money, I was doing my thing. I thought I was living the life. I thought I was
yeah,
going to be like the next Scarface. You know what I mean? Like, that was my mentality. It's like, I'm being a man. Like, let me be a man and do what I got to do to support my family, right? Like, I'm putting
yeah,
food on the table. Why are you complaining, right? And so, make a long story short, she bounced out, she left, and she was down there for about a good 6 months. I was still doing my thing over here in Cali, and my daughter got to the age, she turned 2 years old, and she'd want to call me, she would talk to me, and my daughter, man, she's the one that got me to go because her being her little voice, 2-year old,
yeah,
Daddy, when are you coming?
mm-hmm,
When are you gonna come with us? And
mm-hmm,
it breaks my heart, man, to this day, but
yeah,
I that's when I decided to go over there
yeah,
because I had to be there for my daughter.
yeah,
And yeah, that was a tough one, but I'm glad I did go because the following day or following week, um, the place ended up getting raided,
yeah. That's
and
wild, bro.
everybody went down. Everybody went down. You know
Wow,
what I mean? So I don't know where I'd be at right now if I didn't get that phone call from my daughter. You know,
bro. That's
so
God,
that
man.
that's what happened. Yeah, it is.
That's
It is. That's
God,
why I
bro.
believe it. And
Yeah,
after that, that's when I decided enough was enough. You
yeah,
know what I mean? I got to get out of this lifestyle because I got a taste, I got a glimpse of what can
yeah,
happen if I just continue going down this road. And just that glimpse, just that taste was enough for me to say, I'm done. I don't want to do this no more.
yeah,
And that's when I completely surrendered and said, God, please help me.
bro. That's powerful,
Yeah,
man. Yeah,
thank you.
I have a 2 year old baby girl right now, man. So I get it. Like I get that. Like if
Hmm.
I and I think that's why that story, when as you're saying it right now, it resonates with me because I'm like, man, if I would have put myself in that position, and if Mia, my baby girl, would say that to me, like it would break me too, man. Like
Yeah.
it's yeah. but it's
Yeah,
definitely God, bro.
it all
Yeah,
compiled, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
man, like just living, it kind of woke me up. It's like, what am I
yeah.
doing here? I'm choosing this life over my daughter,
Mm,
you know, and just
mm.
her voice is what did it for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great, bro. Praise God, man,
Yeah.
that you make. Cause look, I mean, look what you're doing now. Like
Hmm.
I mean, you're chosen, bro. Like
Yeah.
it's definitive. Like you were chosen for this. So it's like, yeah, it's wild, man.
100%.
Um, what I want to ask you is, you make the changes in your life. You hit that breaking point, that that crossroads, and as you start, you start getting a job, because I don't know if is that when the AC technician came into play. I remember
Yep.
you talking a little bit about that, yeah, and you did that
Yeah.
for quite some time, right?
Yeah. About
Yeah,
14 years.
wow, bro, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So you get, pretty much, you get the steady job, right? You become the provider. You guys have more kids, right? And what leads you to this incredible calling that you have with Warpath Fitness, man? And let's talk about that a little bit, in terms of the journey from, okay, we got out of that lifestyle, but now we're living the, hey, we're rocking the family game, we're rocking the provider role. But what wakes you up again to actually change trajectory there, and now become this beast of a human being, bro, with the fitness game?
Yeah, brother. So to kind of like back up a little bit,
Yeah,
I went to Texas, and me being, a Cali boy, all tatted up, bald headed, going to Texas, to this East Texas place where, you think of Texas, right? Like cowboys and like small town. That's how it was. You know
yeah,
what I
bro.
mean? Like I go to Walmart, there's only one Walmart. Everybody goes there. Everybody knows everybody. And I stick out like a sore thumb, right? So I'm over here feeling like, man, like this ain't for me, but I can't go back. And so I'm like, I'm gonna get a little job. Well, I end up working like three different jobs, like trying to find my way, right? I was doing yard work, cutting grass, mowing lawns, doing all kinds of stuff. I actually worked for a cemetery where I was actually digging all the holes and stuff for the caskets to go in.
Yeah,
Worked at the cemetery home, cleaning up. Had a concrete job where I was cutting concrete, working all kinds of crazy hours. So what that led me to was like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. I was making good, easy money. Now I'm over here, slaving away, working hard in this humidity, this different area. And I'm like, this ain't me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to continue going down this route. So it pushed me to go to school. And I saw that I was driving down the road and I saw this little billboard, become an AC technician, HVAC, make, 80,000 a year or whatnot. And it was a school advertisement. So I said, you know what, let me stop by there. Let me see what's up. Let me see what they're offering. So I stopped by, and it's a tech school, and they asked me what I want to do or whatnot. And like, yeah, you qualify for a loan, so you could start coming to school. So I was like, you know what, let me try this. You know what I mean? Like AC job, me thinking, I was like, I probably don't got to work outside too much. Air conditioning, usually air conditioning's inside, right? So all right, cool, this would be nice. Well, I get there and it's like, no, you're working in AC because there is no AC. You're there to fix it.
yeah,
So I'm over here. I'm like, oh well, hey, it pays good. It's a trade. Let me get my certificate and then let me move back to Cali. Where I enjoy it, where my family's at.
yeah,
Because AC work, you need it everywhere, right? So
yeah.
that was my goal. It was like, okay, let me get certified. I ended up graduating. It took me about 2 years to do. I still stayed in Texas for probably a good year after that. And then finally told my wife, hey, we're doing good. We're making money. Let's move back. Let's move back to Cali. She was on board with it too. Now she was pregnant with our second daughter. So during the move, she was pregnant, and then she ended up having my daughter in California. So now we're in California, living with my mom, and she has my second daughter. I'm working at an apartment complex, doing maintenance work, AC work, just getting my foot in the door. You know, and then I just still I wasn't satisfied yet. I wasn't like I wanted more. I wanted more, right? So I actually got to an actual AC company where I was kind of like my own boss. I just used their name, so I was like a contractor,
Okay.
and so I would use my own name and stuff like that. But I picked up drinking again. I was
Mhm.
drinking a lot. I wasn't working out. I was using the whole excuse of I got kids, I got a job, I don't have time. All excuses that we come up with, right? That's why I know them all when I hear them. And I was like, you know what? So I'm going to go home, drink some beer, and go to work. I repeated that for a few years. I ended up blowing up, man, getting to like 260 pounds.
Oh, wow.
I'm only like 5'8", 5'7", so I'm not that tall. So 260, almost 300, being that short, it just wasn't good. And in the type of job that I was doing, I was always on my knees, going up ladders. It took a toll on me. So it came to the point where I was just unhappy with myself, right? Even though I had the job, even though I had the family, I had everything working for me in plain view, right? When people look into my life, it's like, what's wrong? Like, there shouldn't be anything wrong with you. I had no purpose with my life. I was just doing the same thing over and over again, a job that I was just going to support my family, and then I was still using alcohol, and it wasn't working. I was unhappy with the way I looked, you know? So it got real bad, man. It got real bad. I'm the type of guy that I do stuff to the extreme. You know, if you notice, if I'm going to do fitness, I'm going to do it to the extreme. I'm going to go all at it. I'm going to be disciplined. And that's why I like it now that I am that way. But before, it wasn't serving me, right? So I had to find my niche. I had to find what I was really good at. And it turned to the point where I was blacking out every weekend. You know, I was getting crazy, getting drunk. I was never a physical person when it came to drinking, but I said a lot of mean stuff. You know, I would say stuff I didn't mean. And that goes back to, you know, when I was drinking before, you know, I didn't like the person I was, but I was still doing it. I was still being that same exact person. And so, yeah, it got to the point again where my wife said, I'm done with this again. Like, you're not changing. You change for a little bit and then you go back. You change and then you go back, and then you promise us that you're going to do it again, and you never do. So like, it got down to the point where it's like, damn, she's right. I am not a man of my word. I have this problem, and it's me that's hurting my family. And I came home one day to an empty house. And that was round two that I went down on my knees.
Yeah.
And it's always my kids. My kids saved me, because when I went into that house the second time when she left, my daughter's blanket was on the floor. Not the same daughter. It was my third daughter.
Yeah.
And this blanket was her comfort blanket. It was like that security blanket that babies have, you know, and she needed this blanket to fall asleep, to, you know, just get through the day, you know. And she didn't have her blanket because of dad, because they had to hurry up and get out of the house before dad got home to leave, and they moved out again. And that was that deciding straw factor right there, where again I dropped to my knees and I said, God, I need help. Like, I need you to deliver me from this addiction, you know, and I can't deal with this anymore. And so that was round two of hitting rock bottom, you know, and that's what led me into starting my fitness journey, you know. And the reason why I wanted to do my fitness journey was because I had to find something to replace my habit, you know. So I was like, you know what? I'm overweight. I'm out of shape. Let me get in a fitness program. Let me change my body. Maybe that's going to help me feel better about myself. I'll stop drinking. And that's what happened. I turned into this guy that was addicted to alcohol. Now I'm addicted to working out. I'm addicted to feeling good. And that's what ultimately branched Warpath Fitness.
An interesting thing to unpack there in terms of discipline, right? And how, I mean, it's a pretty much an accumulation of habits that you're having, right? And what I've seen too, I've witnessed with a lot of people that I think we all have an addictive personality to an extent, right? Where we go all in on something in our life, whether it's vices or something. And so it really is just kind of a shift of like, okay, well, if I'm going to have this addictive personality, if I'm going to go all in on these things, like, let me go all in on the right thing, right? On the thing that's actually going to serve me and make me better, as opposed to going in on the wrong thing, right? So can you expand on discipline itself and what it means to you now versus what it meant to you then, right? And how you go about teaching that, really, like the skill of discipline, the skill of having discipline and also being a disciplined individual, right? Somebody that has discipline in their life. If you can expand on that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, to me, discipline, man, is like doing what's hard, right? Doing what's hard, but for a delayed gratification, right? It is going to pay off if you do it, but you're not going to see the benefits right away. It is hard, right? Like, so waking up early, it's a discipline. You have to wake up early, but you're going to have more hours out of the day, be able to get more done. and just have an upper hand on those that are sleeping in, right? So that's form of discipline. Eating right, working out, all this stuff is under the umbrella of discipline. If you're going to want to be financially free, well, you better have the discipline to be able to do what's right with your money. That means not going out spending, money, buying the new car right away, even though you might be able to afford it. It's that delayed gratification of like, I'm just going to keep working my butt off
Yeah.
until I could afford it twice. And then when I do buy it, it's not a big thing, right? So you can, form that discipline. And how I formed it was through nutrition and through the fitness aspect of it. Now, once I was able to get a handle of myself, then I was able to help other people form that same discipline, right? So you always got to start with yourself first. There is no person that can teach somebody how to do something if they don't have that control either, right? At that point, you're not really doing anything for that individual. So I knew, like, man, I got to be the most disciplined person in my family, in my life, in my household, whatever the case is. That's when I'm going to be able to help somebody else also attribute and get that same, qualities of life. So yeah, man, to me, discipline is just like, it's needed in order to be successful. That's just the bottom line. You're gonna have to form discipline, whether you want to be financially free, you want to be fit, you want to have a great family. You're gonna have to tell yourself no more times than you tell yourself yes. But it is gonna pay off in the long run if are pursuing a certain direction.
You have like all these things where like personal development, entrepreneurship, fitness, right, and mindset. Like all these things kind of go hand in hand. It's almost like you can't have one without the other, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to kind of be leveling up in those areas, or they play into each other. And then of course you have your family, right? Like your the people that you serve in your own home, the people that you've been chosen to lead in your own home. And if you don't have like those dials or those pillars kind of in order, it it makes it difficult, man, to show up for them, right, and set an example for them and all that. So yeah, I've always found it interesting how people that have like their nutrition, their fitness, their personal development on lock, like, hey man, like they usually will have other things in their life pretty dialed in as well, right?
Yeah.
It just plays into that. So yeah.
100%. Yeah, that's the root of everything. That's what I focus on the most, because a lot of people talk about motivation, right? We've all heard that. It's about the discipline part, because the motivation is not going to be there. I'm not motivated 100% of the time, man. Today, I wasn't motivated, right? Yesterday was Thanksgiving. Today was kind of gloomy where I'm at. I'm like, man, maybe I should take today off, or whatever. But no, like that's where my discipline kicks in. And
Yeah.
literally, it gets me going,
Mhm.
because I have to fight my mind sometimes. And I have to realize, like, I'm in control. My mind isn't in control. My mind used to be in control. My mind used to tell me what to do. Now I'm in control. So that's where I can step in and say, no, this is what I do on a daily basis. And I have like a rating system that I do, right? So
Mhm.
I rate, like you said, you got your business, you have your family, you have your fitness, you have your nutrition. So all those four things, what are you rating yourself at, right? If 10 was the highest, okay, so fitness, I go to the gym, 6 days a week. I never miss a day. Okay, I'm at a 10 there.
Mhm.
But I'm neglecting my family life a little bit, and I'm putting a lot of energy also into my business. Okay, now I need to apply that discipline more into my family right now,
Mhm.
right? So I'm still doing everything else the
Yeah.
same way, but now I'm pouring a little bit more. So taking a little bit off my business, or taking a little bit off the fitness, and putting it more towards my family, right? But everything's getting taken care of, everything's getting handled. And at that point, that's when you're kind of, and it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be some categories that are going to be missing. That's okay. But as long as you're continually progressing and making an effort, it is going to all equal out, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes we get that. There seems to be like a cultural guilt trip sometimes that comes with this like work-life balance equation that we keep trying to do, especially when you're jumping into like entrepreneurship, like you're doing, like you're starting your own business. You have your own set of clients, like you're working for yourself,
Hmm.
and so a lot of the times you think that you have to have this work-life balance where if you give so much to your business, and there's a season of life where you're going to be like, all right, I'm always thinking entrepreneurship, like I got to be in my business, and then you're neglecting the wife, you're neglecting the kids or whatever it is. There's these seasons that we go through where sometimes there's a trade-off, right? Like
Right.
something's got to give. um
Hmm.
how do you yourself balance that? Because one of the beautiful things that I see with you is that you have your missus right next to you, man. Like
Hmm.
she's there with you, you know, and it seems like you guys are doing a lot of this together, right? So
Right.
how did that come into play? How did you integrate that? And you know, what was that conversation with her like, or was that just something that she was drawn to because she saw you doing it, right?
Yeah, 100%. You just said it right now.
Okay.
I was the one that had to set that example.
Mm,
I had to be the man, the masculine in my household, right? Automatically, the wife will follow your lead if you're leading correctly. So the man has to lead correctly in order for his wife to submit. Now, people always say, okay, submitting, that's like a bad word, right? It
yeah.
doesn't mean submit in a bad way. It means she's able to let go of her masculinity. She doesn't have to take care of stuff. She doesn't have to pay bills. She doesn't have to do all the hard stuff because you're taking care of that.
Mm,
What she can do now is enjoy her life, hang out with the kids, be compassionate for them, be a woman. It allows her to be her true self. And so naturally, she sees that in a man and she's like, okay, I'm going to follow his lead. Whatever he needs to do, I'm going to support him. I'm going to back him up 100% because he's doing the right things. I don't got to worry about him no more, right? So naturally, she started seeing me change mentally, physically. Okay, I want some of that. What are you doing? How do I track my macros? How do I start working out? I want to feel a little bit better about myself also, you know? And so I got her going with the macros, the fitness. She started feeling good about herself. And then, we started just forming this business together. And everybody's like, how do you like do everything? Your fitness, your family, your
mm,
everything that you're doing. It's all one. So I
do
don't
it
have to
together.
do anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you guys are seeing on my stories, on my Instagram, like I'm documenting my life. Nothing is like role played. I don't make, stuff seem better than what it is. I tell you guys my challenges. I'm just documenting my life and how it is. And that's what people really, get drawn to. It's like, man, he's just doing it. You know what I mean? It's no like special thing. This is just his life now. So it's very easy for me to kind of balance stuff out in a way
Mm,
because my business is also mixed in with family. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like we work together. So if I'm on a business trip, my wife is with me, my kids are with me. We turn it into a family thing,
That's
So,
beautiful.
but there are seasons, like you
Mm,
said,
yeah.
I think your kids would rather you be working on yourself at the gym, feeling good about yourself, than to be home all the time, but they're
Mm,
seeing you miserable. They're
mm,
seeing you laying on the couch, slumped over, watching TV,
yeah.
just like this, right? There's no emotion. You're not doing anything for the family. They'd rather see you go to the gym, come back with all this energy and ready. Hey guys, what's up? Like, dad just killed his workout today. He feels great. You guys want to go to the park? Let's go to the park. Let's go hang out. Like,
Yeah.
man, this is so cool. Dad comes home from the gym and he takes us to the park. You know what I mean? So you do have to, as a man, you do have to sacrifice a little bit of that. And that's why back in the day, what did men do? We went off to war. We left our family for months, days on end. But
Yeah.
what did we do? We came back with the story. We
Mm,
came back with the lesson. We came back with the challenge of like, yeah, dad went through this, he went through that. But look at what I brought home. We have food for the rest of the year now.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So they see that like, okay, my dad, he goes out. Yeah, we miss him for a little bit, but he's handling business for the family.
Mm,
At that point, we respect that. We understand now what he's doing. He's
yeah.
not just going off and hanging out with friends or whatever. No, he's doing this for us, for a purpose.
Yeah.
That's what I tell guys all the time that have the excuse of like, well, I got kids, I got family, I can't go to the gym.
Mm,
Okay, so you think your family would rather you be at the house, miserable, overweight, unhappy with yourself, not giving your best self to them, or would they rather you do the opposite? Spend a little bit time away from them, but then you come back giving them everything you got.
yeah.
You can make that decision.
Yeah. And then your energy,
Yeah,
man, your energy's different, right? Like you
big
come back
time.
and your energy's different, bro. Like it's,
Hmm.
yeah, it makes a world of a difference when you as a leader, you come in and you can set the tone for the household, right?
Yeah.
If instead of you coming back from a long day of work and you're like you said, you're miserable, right? And you
Hmm.
feel like there's a lot of guys that they feel like the sense of entitlement, like, hey, all right, I went out and I killed it. My 8 hours, I worked a little overtime. I killed it today. I'm gonna come home. I'm gonna get my meal, right? The kids are doing their homework. I'm going to chill on the couch and I'm going to get the beer, whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
And that's it. And that's every day, rinse and repeat the same thing, bro. And you come in with
Yeah.
that low level of energy where you weren't happy at work, you're miserable at work, you're coming home from a job that you don't really like, you hate, right? But you do it because you want to provide.
Hmm.
You come home and you're miserable there, and you're bringing that energy into your household. So
Yeah.
like, who's going to want to be around that guy as opposed to the guy that you just described, where
Exactly.
he wakes up at 4 or 5 in the morning, goes out to the gym, kills it, comes back, and he gets ready to tackle the day at that energy level.
Hmm. Yeah.
Different guy, man. Different guy. So yeah, I love
Huge
that, man.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah. I used to
yeah,
be that guy. I used
yeah,
to be that guy that came home and I was so negative because I hated what I was doing. I hated my
mm,
body. I hated the work I was doing.
yeah,
And I would try to come in. My kids, my poor kids, man, they haven't seen me all day. Dad's home, come running out. Dude, I would be like, hold on, let me take off my boots. Wait,
yeah,
give me some space. Give me some space. My poor wife would be like, kids, come over here, give your dad a little bit of space, let him take his boots off. Like I had to like come down and actually decompress myself from the day that I had.
yeah,
And I put my kids to the side. And then I did exactly what you said, kick off my boots, put them on the table, and then tell me, go get me a beer out of the fridge. Dad worked a lot today.
mm,
Like it's like, damn, like I'm just a servant to my dad. I'm just this
yeah,
person that like he'll want my affection when he wants it, you know? Versus like you just mentioned, you wake up 2:30, man, you kill your workout, you feel great about yourself. Now your family's up. Now they get that person.
yeah,
That's night and day difference, all from a decision that you're making.
yeah.
Just little habits that you're changing. That's it.
With regards to marriage, let's talk a little bit about there, right? Because you guys have been through a whirlwind of different things. I mean, you talk about the first round, the second round you guys had, right?
Yeah.
Um, from your experience, man, what are some key takeaways? How long have you guys been together? Married?
We've been married. So we've been married. Shoot, we've been together for 16 years, married for about 5. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, but
Hmm.
what have you come to find, man? Is that thing that helps you guys like stay? Hey, we're gonna go through the thick of this together, ups and downs. Like, what are some tactics that you can think of that are like, hey, like these are non-negotiables. We do these because this is what makes us have a strong marriage for our kids, so that our kids don't have to experience what you had to experience at 16, right? That
Right.
separation, that divorce, and have the impact of that be the thing that they experience. So
Hmm. Yeah. With a relationship, in a marriage, there's 3 people. You got to have you, your wife, and you got to have God.
mm,
Right. That's going to be the center of the relationship. So God has to be that umbrella that's protecting you from all the arrows, the rain, the hail that's going to come on top of you. Right. Because it's going to happen. There's going to be problems in your marriage. There is no relationship that's going to be 100%, trouble free. So God has to be that umbrella. Now, after that, that's where your marriage is at. And then after that, that's where your kids are at, right? So
mm,
there's like a little triangle effect, you should say, that you have to put God first, and then you have to put your relationship first, because how can you take care of your kids if your relationship sucks?
yeah,
Now they're going to see you guys fighting, arguing. You're not eye to eye, and that's going to be problems for the kids, right? So that's number one. Number two is going to have to be knowing that it's you and your wife versus the problem. It's not you and your wife against each other. So a lot of times we're having issues, and it comes and it's like we start butting heads, we start fighting, and then I got to talk to her, she talks to me, and be like, you know what, this isn't me and you versus each other. Let's go together and let's form a way of how to fix this together. Right. So now we take the focus off each other and we're placing it on the problem. Now there's 2 people focusing on the problem versus just one person or another. So that's the second one. And then 3, just having compassion, right? Just understanding, like, she's my wife, she's the mother of my kids, she's a human being, and she's going to make mistakes. She's not going to be perfect. I can't expect her to. I shouldn't. And so just understanding that and having compassion. And, I try to do this with everybody, but especially my wife, like, have I ever made anybody upset? Yes. What I want somebody to give me grace? Yes. So what makes it any different that it's not me? So those are like the 3 main things that I can say that has really helped our marriage. And just communicating together, having hobbies that we can do together. We go to the gym together. Like, Me and my wife fight more when we're not together. You know, a lot of couples are
Interesting.
like, we're together so much, you know, we need a break from each other. Me and my wife are together all the time. And that's when we're the happiest. As soon as she goes off, hangs out with her family, or my, you know, I go with my friends or whatever, like now we start fighting. You know what I mean? Like start arguing and bickering, and then we come together like, okay, we're fine. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's one of those things, man. I think it's just part of we grew up together. You know,
Mm,
we grew up together.
yeah.
We're best friends, you know,
Yeah.
so you got to form that friendship. You know, you got to remember like that's what's going to, your kids are going to move on. Your kids are going to find their life.
Yeah.
They're going to go to college, get married. Who's going to be left in that house? You and your wife. So you guys better form that relationship now, you
Yeah.
know, because then you're going to be in that house like, okay, now what do we do? The people that kept us together, the glue is gone now. Now
Yeah.
what? And that's where a lot of people, you know, they get divorced at that age. It's like, we changed, you know. No, nothing changed. It's just you didn't work on it previously.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things there. Like one, you grew together, right? Like you're going on that growth path together at your own levels, of course, but you're
Hmm.
growing together.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing that I see is that, you know, you talk about people change, and it's true. We do change. Like we're never really
Hmm.
stagnant or the same all the time. Right? Like we're always
Yeah.
changing, but are we changing for the better? Are we changing together? Right? Are we changing? Are we drawing closer to God together in our own paths? Right? And that's going to make the difference. And you're right, man. You were touching on that point of how, you know, it's God, the hierarchy, right? God, marriage,
Hmm.
and then your kids. And your marriage is such a key component to the family structure of it working, right?
Yeah.
And if that's not dialed in, because you see it a lot with parents where, you know, when they do turn 18 or they go to college or whatever the case is, or they go out of the house, they have their own spouse, they start their own families. Um, the mom and the dad, or the wife and the husband, they don't know what to talk about anymore, like, because all this entire time all they've been doing is just focusing on the kids, talking about the kids, talking about what the kids need, what the kids this and great, you know, like being a dad, being a mom, there's no greater blessing, right? But at the same time, it's like, hey man, it's you and me. Like
Hmm.
we're gonna be at the end of this road. It's till death do us part. So we have to be able to communicate and deal with each other and understand each other and grow together. So it's like, yeah, man, you're right. It affects a lot of families, man, when they don't focus on the marriage first and then put that emphasis on the children and on the kids. So
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something that's really key too, as well, right? People change, you
mm,
know, and that's the perfect opportunity for you to fall in love with your spouse over and over and over again, right? Like they were one person last week. Now they're a different person. Okay. That should be like an eye opener. Like, okay, I'm with this fresh person that I got to learn how to love again. She has new hobbies, new thoughts, new things that she wants to do, new goals. Wow, I got to figure out now how I can make her fall in love with me, or I fall in love with her, in a sense, right? Like
mm,
you guys are in love together, but it's like you guys are now different.
yeah,
So how are you going to continue that strong bond with this person now? You know what I mean? So I think that's key, understanding that change will happen. It's inevitable.
mm,
But you guys got to grow together, like you said.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that, man. Um, so I want to talk to you. You got time for a couple more
Oh,
questions? Is that
yeah,
cool?
I
Yeah.
got all the time. Yeah.
Cool, bro.
However long you need.
So there's a famous quote, right, by Frederick Douglass, like where he says, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Right? You've heard it. You might have heard it before.
Hmm.
And I'm curious as to what your thoughts are around that, because you're kind of fixing broken men all the time, right? Men that come to you for the help and for the help that you need, because even though you're leading with the fitness and the nutrition and the training, right, all the stuff that you're offering, the mindset shift really is kind of, I think, is the definitive thing that makes a huge difference in these guys' lives, right? And
Right.
they come to you broken. They come to you with
Hmm.
issues, with vices, with all this stuff. So I'd like you to kind of dive into that a little bit, man. The sort of the formula that you use to sort of help these men out, and why is it the calling, right, to repair? If it's easier to raise children, raise strong children, like, all right, cool, but why are we so called to repair broken men, to help men that need that assistance, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like generational, right? Like
Mm,
past traumas, you know,
mm,
traumas that we got as a kid because our parents, you know, had previous trauma. So, like, going back to the start of the podcast, right? It's like my dad was a certain way because my grandfather didn't do his job, right? He was a broken man. He didn't take the steps. He didn't do the hard work to fix himself. Now it got translated to my dad now. Now my dad has to deal with what his father didn't teach him. And then that got passed on to me. And then it keeps going. It's a cycle, right?
Yeah.
So it takes that man to realize that first. You got to realize that, okay, this is not right. This is not something that I want to continue. I want to change this. This is what my purpose is in life. Is I've been appointed to be this person that's going to actually be a risk taker and to put myself through hell, basically, because it's going to be hard, and you better expect it to be hard. There's going to be tough times. This is why you need accountability. This is why you need a group of men to hold you to a certain standard, because when things are hard, we automatically just want to get away from it, right? It's that fight or flight experience. Are you going to fight for your family? Because you say that you will do everything for your family. But will you? When times get tough, will you honestly do that? Right? So it's a test. It's a test. And so we have to find the root cause of why you're drinking, why you're smoking, why you're looking at pornography, right? So it's all about like just bringing stuff up. In a way, it's like I'm a counselor. All I'm doing is just listening to people and then asking them certain questions that are going to trigger these responses. That's it. That was the root cause. That's the reason why you've been drinking your whole time. Your dad left at an early age and you had to take care of the family. You didn't know how. You freaked out. You got into that flight mode. You found alcohol. Alcohol numbed the pain and made you feel better. It was like that like fresh breath air, right? So then you used it. You coped with it. And that's the same thing with like weed nowadays, right? Weed's like socially accepted just like alcohol now, but people are using it as a way to just release stress, release energy, but it's not fixing the root cause.
Yeah.
So you have to fix that root cause first, and then to really get down to it, because a lot of the times it's not the alcohol, it's not the weed, it's not the porn. It's you are doing this for a particular reason. And once we fix that, now you can kind of see, wow, like I was just using it as a crutch. So it's all about getting rid of those crutches. So I feel like it's about just going back to your childhood trauma and really sitting with yourself sober minded and really thinking about it. Why do I act the way I do?
Yeah.
And getting down to that point, and that's why it's important to do it yourself. That way your kids do not have to go through the same pain that you went through. And if you can comprehend that and make it, okay, this isn't about me. I got to do the work for them. And that's what got me to change, because there's going to be days where you don't want to do the work, right? Like Richard is weak. He doesn't want to do the work, but he has 4 kids that need him to do the work. Now, I would do anything for my kids. So that means I got to get up and I got to do it. And that's really testing how bad do you want your family to be better? Do you truly want the best for your family? If so, you're going to do it. So you got to take the focus off of you. It all comes back to that selfishness that I was talking about.
Yeah. No, I like that, man. The masking the symptoms, right, of what's going on, like getting to the root cause of what's happening, because those are like the vices are just like Band-Aids that they're putting over the actual wound, right? Like they're not getting to the actual root cause of what's going on. And it's interesting that you mentioned about how all that stuff happens a lot from childhood, right? Like from you being a kid and the trauma that we go through. I was reading a study a couple of years back, actually. There's this guy named Dr. Joe Dispenza and then Dr. Bruce Lipton. You've heard of these guys?
Yeah, I have their books.
Yeah, dude, like it really smart dudes, man. And they talk about how I think Bruce Lipton talk about how like the first 7 years of a kid's life is their brain waves, the way that their brain processes is operating on a different type of frequency, right? I think they called it like a theta frequency, where they're constantly accepting. It's almost like they're constantly downloading, right? Which is why as kids, they pick up so many things, man. Like they pick up, like my kid, he's 5, is my oldest, and he'll hear a song, dude, and he'll recite it. He'll know the hook. He'll know everything. Like right off the bat, he'll know the melody, like right off the bat. I'm like, dude, how do you do that? Like I have a hard time remembering like song lyrics, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it, that kind of answers the question, is that they're always downloading, but because they're so, their brain waves and their brain is working that way, at that age, they're so prone to trauma that occurs at that age, right? Like the trauma is much more impacted. I think about myself, like I was introduced to pornography I don't think I've ever shared this on the podcast, but I'll share it with you. Uh, at 7 years old, right?
Hmm.
I was uh, I was being taken care of by my babysitter, and who lived on the same block, right? This was in Linwood, California, if you're familiar with that area, and so yeah, my mom trusted this lady. She was like, "Hey, this lady's cool. Like she takes care of kids on the block." That's what it was. But it was her older sons, that introduced me. And here's the weird thing: is that I knew that in my household, my dad had a couple of VHS tapes that he wouldn't let us see on top of the closet, right in the closet, somewhere in the corner. I knew they were there. I didn't know what they
Hmm.
were. I knew they were hidden from me. And when these boys, 12, 13, 14-year-old boys that were at my babysitter's house, they start talking like, "Hey man, like, did you get the keys to your house?" My mom left the keys to the house in case I need to go get some snacks or whatever, right? They're like, "Hey, does your dad have any porn?" That's what they asked me. I was like, "What is that?" It was like, "Oh, well, it's, they tell me, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, I think he has like some VHS tapes up in the corner or whatever." So they're like, "Oh, let's go to your house," So they tell their mom like, "Hey, we're just gonna go over and play at G's house over there." So we go over, bro, and then I tell them where it's at. They grab the VHS tapes, they put them on, and that's my first introduction to that stuff.
Yeah.
And then that becomes a freaking addiction that I can't get rid of, that I feel like
Hmm.
shameful of,
Hmm.
for years, bro. And I get to 13 years old. I'm in the church. I grew up at 14. I started rapping. So I was doing the Christian hip hop thing for a long time, performing and all that. And even during that time, bro, it was hard to break the habit. There
Yeah.
was times where even after like church, we would be watching that with like youth pastors and like youth leaders and like people, you know what I mean? Like how
Yeah.
horrible is that? But how harsh that freaking vice and that addiction was, that gets ingrained. And just because at a young age somebody gets the opportunity to influence us in that negative way, man, and then it impacts us for the rest of our lives, right? And
Yeah.
it took me years, even after I got married, bro, to break that vice and get rid of it and just see like, hey man, I'm breaking the chains here. I'm changing the bloodline right here. And my
Yeah.
kids are not going to be affected by this. I'm not going to be that dad that has freaking porn in my house, or they're going to find, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be
Hmm.
that guy, or that has
Yeah.
freaking pictures or posters of naked chicks on my wall where my kid walks into my office and sees, like, what am I showing this kid? What am I showing
Right.
them? So it's interesting that you talk about the childhood trauma, bro, because it brought that thought to my head. I'm like, man, like it's crazy how impressionable we are at that age, and how even as adults, man, as grown freaking men, like we're still struggling with that stuff. We're still coping, finding ways to cope with it. And until we get somebody like yourself that comes in and kind of challenges us and says like, hey man, I know that you went through this stuff, and I know that this vice and all, and you're able to unpack that and help them unpack that, bro. Like that's freaking awesome. Cause
Yeah.
you're helping them change, man. You're helping them change. And, uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
100%, man. I tell people like this all the time, man. Like you're still that 13-year-old boy that
yeah,
was struggling with that. Only thing that's different is that you're 33 now,
yeah,
right? So just the age changed, but the same brain structure, the same way that your brain functions is the same way. It's all rooted the same. So literally, when I grab guys, I have to change the way their brain operates.
mm,
You know what I mean? I have to
yeah,
get them to think differently.
yeah,
Now, once they're able to think differently, now they're able to make different connections in the brain, right?
yeah,
So we're literally changing those neurons and stuff that are happening, that are firing. We're firing them differently, and that's the hard part about my job. And I have to tell people this: you got to give yourself grace and compassion, because this stuff is hard. Like we're changing the structure of your brain,
yeah,
and like you're removing one bad habit and you're replacing it with a good habit. Not only do you have to learn the discipline of having that good habit, like eating correctly, right? Like macros, I get people like, macros, what's that? How do I track that? That's a whole nother thing in itself, right? But we're going to use that to form the discipline. We're going to use going to the gym, which is hard, as the discipline. So as you're learning this new habit, you're also removing this old habit, which
mm,
is also hard. So you have to realize that, and it's like that's where I tell people, that's where me started drinking. I saw my dad do it, and then there was alcohol in my house.
Mm.
So it was easily accessible. That's why I don't drink, right? Let's say I tell people like this. So it's not about you. That's what I tell people. Okay, it's not about you. Stop being selfish. You might not have the alcohol problem, right? You might be able to have a drink or two and be completely fine. So you store alcohol in the cabinet, you have beer in the fridge, you hardly touch it, but it's there.
Mm.
But your son sees you drinking it every so often. Oh, my dad gets happy when he starts having this drink. Let me taste it. Your son has the addiction though. So now he's able to access this stuff and get that addiction
Yeah.
from you. So like I used to see my uncles drink, get in the car, drive home. They were fine, never got a DUI.
Mm.
So, okay, that's what I'll do. When I start drinking, I can make it home. Well, guess what? I got the DUI. My uncles didn't. I'm the one that got it because I was watching them. So you got to be careful, like you said, having posters in your house with half naked girls that might trigger something in your kid's brain. Oh, what is that? Let me look more into that stuff.
Yeah.
I like that stuff. Now it becomes something that's a battle the rest of their life. It wasn't a battle for you, it was just a picture. But to them, now it's that addiction that it's hard to break.
Yeah.
And that's what we got to think about.
Yeah, man. It transcends us, man. Like the impact, sometimes we do things in our own life, or we have certain habits in our life that think are very, like, unintentionally, they're not that bad, right? Like we give it that
Mm-hmm.
label, like, it's not that bad that I do this. It's not that bad. But dude, you don't understand the effect that it has on the people, because you're always being watched, man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and kids pick up more, what they see than what you actually tell them. Like, you could tell them all
Mm-hmm.
day not to do this, not to do that, but if you're, if you're operating by the whole guise of, like, do as I say but not as I do, it's like
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to win, man. Like, you're not setting them up for success doing that. So you
Yeah.
got to be that example, right? You got to be that example. So yeah, man, I love that. That's powerful for sure.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, bro. All right, man. I want to be respectful of your time, brother, and I want to hit you with the last question that I like to hit all of our guests with, which is, in your experience with working with so many men, right? What have you come to find to be, if you could narrow it down to a few traits, what have you come to find to be the traits that make a dad a good family leader?
I think it's going to be a lot of compassion and discipline.
Mm.
So having the discipline to do what's right, even though you might not want to do it, right?
Mm.
And then having compassion to understand that your kids are not going to be perfect, your relationship's not going to be perfect. So give them grace. And sometimes, those might look differently, right? You have discipline, which might seem like full on, keep going, we don't quit, we don't take no days off. And then you have compassion on this end, which is soft and like be kind to people, right? Give them what how I try to think of it is like Jesus reading the Bible.
Mm.
Like if you read the Bible, like Jesus, you don't mess with him, man. Like he'll mess your life up, but he'll also have compassion for you when you need it, right? And that's a man to me. You know what I mean? That Jesus is the ultimate man. He hung around all the people that were drunk. He hung around prostitutes. He hung around people that weren't socially accepted. But did he give into that stuff? No, because he had the discipline. He knew his purpose, but he had compassion for them as well, where he can relate to them and say, "Hey, you're no different than I am. Let me teach you my ways. These are the ways that you got to live your life, and if you do, your life will be that much better for it." Right? And so I think that's what makes the best qualities in a man is just going back to those morals, going back to those values. What do you stand for? Now that's going to require some discipline because the world's going to try to change you, right? We got to be not of this world. And sometimes we get caught up in the world. I find myself getting caught up in the world, right? And we got to remove ourselves from that and hold ourselves to a higher standard. That's what I'm trying to teach men. You don't got to be like the rest of the people. You don't got to be like the rest of the men that you see on TV, right? Nowadays, we're missing so much masculinity that people are scared to be a man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're considered a man, you're toxic.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like that toxic masculinity. No, we need more of that stuff
Yeah.
around. That's why kids are failing.
Mhm.
We're failing the kids by not being a man in the household, not setting them straight. So there's a way that you can set your kids straight, but without being where this like you're this mean dad in a way, right? Like I just got to look at my son and he already knows. Like, okay, dad means business. I better stop. And that's good because I don't got to threaten him with whipping him with a belt and stuff like my parents did. It's like no. So having that discipline, your morals, your values set up, but then also having the compassion and letting them know, like, dad got your back. You can come talk to me. I understand what you're going through, right? Like, it's okay. You're going to be okay. Dad's here. Dad will take this for you. You know what I mean? I'm going to show you the way. Don't worry. So I think those are the two qualities that men need. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that a lot, man. It reminds me of you know who John Lovell is? The guy from
Yes.
Warrior Poet Society. Yeah, he talks about
Hmm.
being the warrior and the poet, right?
Right.
You gotta have both. It's like he comes from the army ways, right? So it's like you could be the hardcore like drill sergeant. You can play that role. You could be the warrior, but you can't be that 100% of the time, man. Like you're not gonna get
Hmm.
anywhere with your family and all that. You gotta have that poet side or that, like you were saying, discipline and compassion side, right? To be able to tell your kids that you love them, to
Yeah.
tell your wife that you love her, and that you can do that in front of the kids, and you can show that love. And it's that balance of being able, not balance, I would say it's probably just the ability. It's like true masculinity is like the ability to turn on and off that switch, right? We know
Right.
when to deploy that version of ourselves depending on the circumstance, right? And it's just you're right, man. A lot of people they're putting the label toxic on it, and like toxic is not, it doesn't even exist, man. It's just masculinity. It's just like, hey, like you got to be a man, dude. Like there's things that you got to do, there's responsibilities and duties that you have to do. And as a family man, being a provider is like the bare minimum of what you need to do. Like there's this whole other gap of things that you got to live up to, man. And that those kids that you have, those blessings from God that you have, the wife that you have, not every man on here on this planet gets to be a dad. Not every man on this planet
Hmm.
gets to be a husband. Not every man gets to be a family leader or a family man gets an opportunity there. So if you already have that opportunity, like there's already a huge responsibility that you have to fulfill. And if you're not taking that seriously, you're going down the trajectory that where you may just end up being another statistic, man. Like just another
Hmm.
stat, and we don't want to do that. Like that's not what this is
Hmm.
about. That's not what the goal is. That's not what God has put as a mission for us to fulfill. We got to be different than that. So when balancing that or understanding when to deploy the warrior and the poet and developing those two versions of ourselves is key. It's like absolute key. So yeah, man, I love that
Right.
answer. Pumps me up, dude. I
Yeah,
love it.
definitely. Yeah, I love it, man. I'm all about that. I'm
Yeah,
all about the negative, positive, right? It's all the
yeah,
same stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Positive is God, negative is the devil, right? So,
yeah,
however you want to say it, if you don't believe in God, well, you believe in energy, you believe in
mm,
the universe,
yeah,
right? So there's good energy, there's bad energy. You're talking about the same thing.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't know why we get caught up in all that, who's right, who's wrong type stuff. It's all the same. It's all the same stuff to me. But yeah, man, definitely.
The semantics of it all, right? Like the
Yeah,
words and
yeah.
all that.
People want, yeah, yeah. It's
There's
crazy.
there's a
There's new gods and new stuff developed every day, man.
bro,
It's crazy
every
what
yeah,
people are
every
doing.
single day. I can't get with it, bro. Like I can't.
Yeah,
I can't get with the people give me some hard time sometimes with the universe thing because I can't get behind the whole universe thing because I'm like, dude, like I want to talk to the guy that created the universe. Like the universe is too weak
right.
for what I got going on. Like I need to go up that rank,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So the whole universe thing, I'm like, it's kind of a cop out to me, right?
yeah, yeah.
But
I tell people like when they bring that up, it's like, well, who, like you said, who developed the universe? Who
mhm,
made the universe?
yeah,
It was God, right? So you're over here denying the person that made what you believe in. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make sense to me. So
yeah,
yeah, it's crazy, but
yeah.
what can you do?
I know, right? Yeah, it takes
You can
time,
only be
man.
an example.
You can only be an example. That's what it is,
Hmm.
man. That's what it is. One last thing I'll share with you is that I was something that I actually was what I learned yesterday. Right, I like to watch this guy named Myron Golden. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he has a pretty good um, not podcast, I'm sorry, YouTube channel. He's like a business coach, but he's a Christian family man. We've been doing it for quite some time, and it talks a lot about entrepreneurship and all that. But he teaches business principles based on the Bible and like King Solomon and like how King Solomon did his business and how people would pay him all sorts of crazy money and come see him from all over across the world and all that. So he uses a lot of those principles. But one of the things he was talking about yesterday is he was talking about Genesis and how why is it that God, right, put the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the middle of that garden that was like this, it was a paradise, really, right? And then everything was perfect for Adam and Eve. And the only thing God says, like, hey, but I'm going to put this tree right here. That's kind of like temptation, right? To do this. And then that was the key as to how we fell, right? And a lot of people always ask, well, why do evil things happen? Why does evil exist? Why do wrong things occur? Why does wrong even exist, right? And you were talking about the yin and yang thing, and that kind of triggered that memory for me. Is he was saying that in order for right to have any value or merit, the opportunity to do wrong has to exist, right? And when he said that, bro, I was like, man, it clicked in. I was like, what the heck? Like, yeah, he's right. Like, you have to have an enemy that you got to fight in order for you to be strong. Like, or else you don't have a reason to be strong, right? Or else you don't have a reason to do those things. Like you have to have something to protect your family against, to want to be that protector for them, or to want to be a good leader for them. And dude, when he said that, it just clicked, and I'm like, man, this is it. We need evil to exist, which is crazy to say, right? Yeah. But in order for good to have the merit that it does, because if evil doesn't exist or wrong doesn't exist, then good and right is just the default, right? And then and there's no growth there. We need adversity. Yeah. It's just a part of the life, man. And God has kind of set up this design that's very perfect in that way, because that allows us the opportunity to choose Him, right? To use our willpower, or not our willpower, I'm sorry, our willingness to be able to follow Him or not, right? Like we have the option. So it just sparked that thought, man, when you were talking about that, and I just thought I'd share that with you. It was kind of an interesting thing I learned yesterday. So
yeah, no, that's what I was going to say, is like God wants us to choose Him, because if He just placed it in our hearts to already believe in Him, He wouldn't be as powerful as He is. You know what I mean? Like we have to make that decision. God's the type of God that wants us to open the door for Him. He's always there. He's standing right there, but we have to do the work to open the door and invite Him into our life. Yeah. Once we do it, that's when He takes over, right? That's when we're able to see the blessings. But yeah, 100% true. You know, in order for God to exist, there has to be the devil. Yeah. You know what I mean? There has to be evil in the world. That way God can reveal His power, what He's capable of doing. Yeah. Now it's just a matter of your choice. What are you going to choose to accept? What are you going to choose to believe in? You know? Yeah.
No, I appreciate that, man. Dude. Bro, I could talk to you forever, man. I appreciate you so much, man. Thank you so much for making the time, man, and coming on. Truly honored, really, to have you. And last thing I want to just ask is just, how can we support you, man? Where can we find out what you're doing, what you got going on? If you can give us the information, I'm going to link all that stuff in the show notes below as well. So everybody can get in contact with you and go to Warpath Fitness and all that, man.
Yeah, so I have my website, warpathfit.com, and then also my IG, warpath.fit, on Instagram. So I'm doing online training, and then I'm also doing in-person training. So if you're local to the area, I'm in Riverside County. So that's where I'm doing a lot of my in-person, but you could always reach me wherever you're at for online. Shoot me a DM. Just shoot me a DM. I answer all my DMs, so you'll talk directly to me, and we'll connect. I'll find out kind of what your goals are, what you're needing, and then we'll take it from there.
Sounds good. Well, that's going to wrap it up for another episode of Alpha Dad Consulting. Thank you again, Richard, for joining us, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out my conversation with Richard Macias. If you got value from this episode, all I ask is that you share it with someone that needs it. I've linked up all of Richard's contact info in the show notes below, so please go check out what he's got going on at Warpath Fitness. All right, I'm a fellow Alpha Dad. I'll catch you on the next one. 1, 2, 3 actions I didn't meet. 4, 5, 6 fear and silence begin to mix. 7, 8, 9
The thought of being emotionless started taking over my mind.